Welcome in to the New Orleans Saints podcast, hosted by Erin Summers and John DeShazier. You'll hear from players, coaches, broadcasters, and writers who cover the team on a daily basis. The New Orleans Saints podcast starts right now. Here's your hosts, Erin Summers and John DeShazier.
I think we just need to win, man. I think we are desperate for a win. Losing 5 games straight is just not something that I even want to utter anymore, or utter at all. And so we need to win. I think the city is in need of that. We are more than in need of that. And so yeah, we're desperate.
That was tight end Juwan Johnson on how much this team really needs to get back in the win column with this upcoming game against the Broncos. But before we get to any talk about Denver and them being here on Thursday night, we definitely have to go back to Sunday's game against the Bucs. I'm Erin Summers alongside John DeShazier. It was a 51-27 loss in the Superdome on Sunday to Tampa Bay. A lot of division implications, but overall, seeing the defense allow 44 points because the offense did have a turnover on their opening drive that led to 6 and then 7 there. That's kind of unheard of for this defense led by head coach Dennis Allen.
Yeah, that doesn't happen to this defense, but I think Sunday really, Scott Shanley, former Saints linebacker, really put it in a good perspective from the standpoint of this defense is worn out. It had to be exhausted. It played 80 plays against Kansas City where you saw some leakage during that game and at the end. And then 72 on Sunday where you saw basically the floodgates open at the end. But that responsibility falls on the defense. They're on the field a lot because they're not getting off the field. They're not getting third down stops that they need. And in addition to that, the chunk plays have really become an epidemic. And that's something that has plagued this team this season. And it's had several chunk plays against it because it's been unable to tackle properly, which is something that has plagued this team this season. So there are some things that have to be fixed in a hurry. And as we heard Dennis Allen say, they can't really be physically addressed during a short week. But mentally, it's got to be addressed. And look, physically, it's going to have to manifest itself on the field Thursday night because if I'm any opponent for the Saints, I'm going to force this defense to have to tackle and to have to make plays because right now it has shown it cannot do it or not consistently do those things. And that's why this team has lost 4 straight.
DA said that they're definitely going to make sure that they have the techniques down as far as tackling goes. But I feel like it's more of just a mentality that you want to take this guy down. You're not going to let him past you. And yeah, if you're tired, it's harder to do that. So maybe it's not so much a physical thing. They know how to tackle, but it's the mental aspect of doing it.
Yeah, but if you're taking an improper angle, then it's hard to get a guy on the ground. Now, we saw one yesterday where, it's kind of a shoulder tackle attempt. You launch with the shoulder, and that's not fundamental tackling. You got to wrap the guy up and get him on the ground. And so we're seeing things that fundamentally are not in sync with what happens when you tackle well. And so, and like I said, now some of this is, you got a guy one-on-one, you got to get him on the ground. You got to wrap him up. And that is some of that's fundamental, some of that's attitude, some of that's a little bit of everything. But you got to be able to get a guy on the ground. If you can't get a guy on the ground one-on-one, it puts a lot of pressure on the defense. And we heard him in the locker room saying there's got to be 11 guys to the ball. But when you're in the flat, kind of on an island with a guy, and he beats that first guy, how fast can the troops rally to him to get him on the ground? And when you're rallying to him, are you taking the proper angle? Because if you're flying in and you don't have the proper angle and you're reaching and you can't really get a good grasp, the guy's just going to run through an arm tackle. So, there are some things that are alarming, especially for this defense, which has been so good for, since 2017, essentially, when Dennis Allen kind of rejoined. He rejoined the team, I think, in 2015. But since 2017, that's the mother lode draft with Marshawn Lattimore, first round pick. This has been a really, really good defense. Now, there have been spots where there have been some struggles, but and I think it's such an outlier. Yesterday was such an outlier. 594 yards allowed and 44 points. That's such an outlier that it plummeted the Saints defense to last in the league.
Right.
Yards allowed. And the points per game allowed jumps suddenly. So now, but again, you hope it's an outlier. Willie Gay Jr. said in the locker room, several times, it's one game, it's one game, it's one game. But saying it's one game is one thing, but when it's one game on the end and you add it to a previous 3-game losing streak, now you got sirens going off for me, because it's like, yeah, I understand that's one game, but you put those other 3 games with it, and that's 4 games, and you're 2-4 instead of 3-3 or 4-2 or whatever. And now that is when you get alarmed, and as well you should be, because when Juwan Johnson says, we're desperate for a win, he ain't lying.
Yeah.
It's early in the season, and look, things can happen. There are 11 games remaining. The Saints could win all of those games, theoretically. But until you win one, the only taste that's left in your mouth is 51-27 and 594 yards allowed, and you're on the field for 72 plays, and the time of possession is against you again, and they run for 277 yards, which when a team runs for 277 yards against you, that is, we can punch you in the mouth however many times we feel like it, and you're going to take it because you hadn't shown us you can stop. Because we said the same thing when the Saints ran for 190 and 180 in the first 2 games. Hey, that's a physical attitude. That is, we can run the ball on you, and you can't do nothing about it.
Right.
When they get 277, so you got to be able to stop that, because every opponent you're playing looks at that film and says, if they punched him, we can punch him. So you got to be the one to stop that. Nobody's going to look at the film and say, you know what, they ran for 277, let's throw it. Nobody's going to do that. They're going to say, they ran for 277, let's see if we can run for 277.
Sure. And when you have your top 5 players on defense that led the team in tackles, all DBs, it's telling you that players are making it into the secondary.
Yep, they're on
with
the second
ease.
level. Yeah, they get to the second level, and you don't want your DBs and your safeties to have to be the ones making those tackles, 8 yards, 10 yards down the field, because one, they're probably at a physical disadvantage because they're probably smaller than the running back. 2, the running back's got a full head of steam, and he's got some vision to where he can make a cut, and suddenly that cut results in a missed tackle. And that's where things start to blow up and get out of proportion and get warped like they were yesterday.
Yeah. So you mentioned the 277 yards on the ground. It was rough, and it kind of just continued, especially in the second half. But if you look at the second quarter and the takeaways that they were able to force with the 3 interceptions, this defense, they've shown so much potential. And that finally, the explosive plays, the yards that they've allowed, it highlight the dam broke, because they were not able to hold the Bucs in the red zone this one.
Well, the second quarter was basically a perfect storm. And you get 3 interceptions, you get a punt return for a touchdown, you get a short field the entire quarter. So everything that could go right basically did go right. The problem with that is, what's the sustainability of that kind of quarter? Because you're not going to get another 3 interceptions in a quarter.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard to get another punt return or kick return for a touchdown in the game. So now defensively, because think about it, defensively, yeah, they got those 3 turnovers, but other than that, which is huge, it's huge. But other than that, Tampa Bay's offense was moving the ball and getting and scoring. It was 27-24 at halftime.
Yeah.
So yeah, you got the 3 interceptions and you got those stops, but otherwise Tampa Bay was getting into the end zone and kicking field goals. and you mentioned the scoop and score, but it was like, okay, can you sustain, because you've had a lot of good fortune in that quarter, and some good fortune is different. You get tipped interceptions, deflected interceptions. Now you create your own fortunes with those, because guys got to be in position to do that, and they got to have the effort to do that. But again, a punt return for a touchdown, you're probably not going to get another one of those in the game. Are you going to get, maybe you can get another interception, but are you going to get 3? That's a mother load. And are you going to be able to continually put your offense in short field positions to where it can be able to score? Because you got a rookie quarterback, he's going to need some help. 27 points was wonderful, but he's going to need some more help, because you can't put the game on his shoulders, especially when you fall behind. So, again, the Saints are going to have to find some things that are sustainable, and we've seen this team, be able to do that. Now, in hindsight, Carolina's horrific, and Dallas doesn't look a whole lot better than Carolina right now.
Yeah.
But you got to be able to beat the teams that are on the schedule. So at the time, they felt good, and they still feel good when you reflect on it, because now things have gone so far the other way. But you got to find some things that you can do to sustain consistently in games to be able to be the team that you hope you are.
At the end of the game, the Bucs were 4 of 5 in the red zone, which was an area that usually the Saints had been able to lock down. But again, you can't just keep allowing teams to gain yards on you and hoping that you make the play when they get down there within the 20. That's just not sustainable.
Yeah.
And the fact that you do have those 3 turnovers, the Saints only scored a touchdown off of one of them. So again, it's complementary football. You got to help each other out. And the defense was gifted you with extra possessions and you in good field position, and you can't get into the end zone.
Yeah, and that's, you said the magic word, complementary football. When the defense gives it to you, you got to be able to not just score. You got to be able to score touchdowns. You got to get in the end zone to cash in, because that other team has a pretty good offense that you're playing yesterday. They had been really good, and Baker Mayfield came into the game with 11 touchdowns and 2 interceptions.
Right.
Now, Saints got three of them off of him in the second quarter, but that is an outstanding ratio. So that team can score. So you got to be able to put those footballs in the end zone and score. And, kicking field goals is nice. It's better than nothing. But you got to be able to get touchdowns in those situations, because if you don't get touchdowns, then it's going to be hard to hold that team off, because they're going to score some more. They're going to be aggressive. And once they get in position to score some more, now your offense, everything looks great on the scoreboard, 27 points, but very few of them generated by your offense. So now you got to figure out, okay, can we generate something with this offense? And additionally, they start blitzing more. So, they're saying, okay, you got a rookie quarterback. He looked pretty good in that first half. Let's see if he can handle this pressure. And, I'm not criticizing Spencer Rattler. A lot of teams don't handle Tampa Bay's pressure very well. And in the second half, they said, okay, we're going to heat him up and see what he can do with it. And he's missing Chris Olave at receiver too. So you got a lot of things that compounded themselves. And
he's got a banged up O-line.
Yeah, you got a banged up O-line. So, there are a lot of things that compounded themselves to where Tampa Bay said, and they might have been saying, well, why in the world weren't we blitzing earlier?
Sure.
Because they've got a banged up offensive line. Their number one receiver was knocked out of the game on the first series of the game for the Saints. So it's just one of those things where it was a perfect storm of good. And then you had a storm that was, I hate to say, an imperfect storm of injuries, and they start blitzing, and then everything goes sideways, and it's like it just avalanched, and there was no way that the Saints could really get their hands around it and stop it.
It was the second straight game where the offense wasn't able to score on their opening drive, and then the defense allowed the opponent to score on their opening drive, and then the way that the offense, had the turnover, Chris Olave fumbles, the scoop and score. You're down 17-0 early in this one, and everybody in the stadium is like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah, well, everybody's saying that. Basically, they're up 14-0 before you can breathe hard, because they scored a touchdown.
People probably weren't even in their seats yet.
They scored a touchdown, and Chris Olave, I think his fumble was on the second or third play from scrimmage or whatever it was for the Saints, and they scoop and score with it.
Yeah.
So they basically get a bonus They get a bonus possession immediately to go up 14-0, and before you know it, you are completely shocked because it's like, okay, and there's a rookie quarterback who's going to have to come back from this, and before you know it, it's 17-0 before half of the first quarter is over, and it's like that's a lot of pressure on this rookie quarterback. But again, put themselves in position in the second quarter, but your offense has got to be much more effective in the second half. And that's saying a lot, and I understand it because, as we mentioned, 3/5 of your offensive line, your starters, aren't there. And I don't know if there's a time in franchise history that I can recall that the Saints started 4 different centers in 4 straight games. That is like alarming. That's like, what in the world is going on? To go from McCoy, and I think to Shane Lemieux.
And Lucas Patrick filled in, though.
And Lucas Patrick started against Denver. And then he got hurt and he went in and moved back to left guard, I think. And then you go with Connor McGovern this last game. So it's like, my goodness, who has had this kind of buzzer's luck in the NFL?
Yeah.
And so, you don't make excuses because your opponent don't care if you got people hurt. But man, it's and I'm loath to make excuses about injuries, but good grief, what is going? I mean, it's like, this is so alarming. You got to take note of it because it's so odd.
Yeah, I mean, you have a new left guard who was hurt for the majority of the preseason training camp, first 4 games of the season, with Nick Saldiveri in there because Lucas Patrick is out. You have your right guard that is been switched in and out, but Landon Young kind of holding it down now since Cesar Ruiz is out. That you mentioned the center position, but then you have a rookie tackle, and then you have basically another rookie.
Right tackle.
Yeah, because Trevor Penning hadn't played that position.
Yeah.
So the youth on the offensive line was concerning for everybody during training camp, even with Caesar and Eric McCoy available. So yeah, where we're at right now, you don't want to say, oh, it's just because we're injured, but it does play into how things have gone. I mean, you look back at that Eagles game, and things were moving until Eric McCoy got hurt.
Eric McCoy is one of the best centers in the NFL. People can say what they want to say, but Eric McCoy quietly has been one of the best centers in the NFL. Finally got to the Pro Bowl last year, but I think that was overdue. But even had he not gone to the Pro Bowl, he's been one of the best centers in the NFL. And to lose him early in that Philadelphia game, and this offense hasn't quite looked the same since Eric McCoy went out. Now, I understand there's some other injuries, but he's the anchor. He's the dude. And to lose him has really affected this line. And as you mentioned, you just went down the list of injuries. And oh, by the way, Connor McGovern, who's playing center now, was at home considering retirement.
Right.
Was at home considering retirement.
But I don't mean to laugh, but
I mean, because it's kind of, you got to laugh from crying.
Yeah.
You keep from crying. So it's one of those things where it's like, I hate to say what else can happen because there's always something worse that can happen. But but it's like, you know what, football gods, okay, I don't know what else you got for this team, but the next thing better be something good because you have smacked this team around pretty hard so far.
The health of the O-line does come into it has an effect on your ability to run the ball. And Alvin Kamara is giving it his best shot. Speaking of somebody who's been banged up, I think he has 3 different injuries currently.
Yeah.
And then Taysom Hill has not played in the last 2 games. And we've seen the difference in this team when he is available and when he is not. How big of a factor is just the fact that Hill hasn't played in these past 2 games and AK is just out there by himself trying to run?
Well, Taysom is that banger running back. He's the guy who, when you need that physical 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, whatever it is, you can put him either, running the quarterback power, or you can just put him in the backfield and hand it to him. And we've seen him effectively be a running back this season. Mm-hmm. And so you lose him, you lose that element of the yin and yang with Alvin because, Alvin can hit you with the slices and, a little bit of speed, and then Taysom can just bruise you up. And Taysom is the Saints guy who, when he gets to the second level, people don't want to tackle.
Right.
people don't want to tackle him.
Yeah, you talk about the safeties and the corners being smaller. Yeah, they don't want that.
Yeah, he is that for the Saints. The Saints are seeing it from the other side, but he would provide the Saints that, and having him not be in the lineup, it changes some of the stuff you want to do and some of the stuff you physically can do. It's a lot tougher for the Saints now to get that 3rd and 1.
Yeah.
You take it for granted. You say, oh, okay, it's 3rd and 1. Hey, they're in a good situation. It's a lot harder to get it when you don't have a guy who's a thumper to get it, and you don't have the majority of your offensive line, so you've lost that chemistry and cohesion. Those guys, operate in unison, and now you got new guys trying to figure out the unison.
Yeah.
And, well, this guy stepped, 6 inches further than you stepped, and now that just throws things off a little bit, just a little bit.
The hole's not the same. Yeah,
and it doesn't. It minute things can make it look a lot worse than it actually is, but those minute things add up. So, man, not having Taysom is huge, because unfortunately you're not quite getting it out of Jamal Williams. Now, it looks like Kendre Miller might be coming back this week. We don't know yet, but DA says he will be ready. So he might get called up this week to give you some of that element if you don't have Taysom Hill, and I would assume Taysom's not going to be playing if Kendre's about to be pulled up. So, maybe you can get some of that with Kendre Miller, but again, Taysom is so effective and he's tight end, so he'll go out on routes, and you can run that quarterback power where you just snap it to him and let him choose a little crease to go up and punish somebody. Because if you don't get him before he starts going, he's going to fall forward. He's going to end up falling forward, and he's probably going to run over somebody and take somebody with him.
Kendre Miller definitely has a bigger build than Alvin Kamara does. I mean, he is a block.
Yeah, and the issue with Kendre is, what's the best availability?
Yeah.
He hadn't been available. So can he take the pounding that the Saints are going to ask him to take at times? Because Alvin, to his credit, God bless him, smaller dude, but he's taking it.
Yeah.
Where the run goes, where he sees the daylight, and when there is no daylight, he says, you know what, let me just duck under here and get this 1 yard, or let me keep this being a no gain instead of a loss of 3. So he's willing. But now you get a bigger guy in Kendre that hopefully can create a little bit of something out of nothing, because sometimes you just got to get up in there and hit it hard and fall forward for 2.5, 3 yards instead of dancing around. So hopefully he'll be able to be the guy that can do that.
Yeah, we haven't really fully touched on Spencer Rattler in his NFL debut, and Da just said I think he played really well in the first half. The second half, you mentioned how the pressure really increased and there was a lot being thrown at him. But I do think that there's potential there. He showed an ability to scramble at times. He was hitting all different areas of the field and different players.
Yeah, they were pretty good with the misdirection early. That mobility is kind of today's NFL quarterback. You got to have a guy who can create something, who can move around, who can buy time. And then when you get those broken plays, you got to be able to have some receivers who can read that quarterback and get to the open spots, get in his line of sight. Or that quarterback can tuck it and get 7, 8 yards out of it, hopefully. So those are the things that we saw from Rattler. And, some of the youth showed in that second half. I think he was 11 for 23, 104 yards, and both of his interceptions. So it kind of caught up to him. And like I said, Tampa Bay said, you know what, this is a young guy. Let's see if he can read these blitzes. Let's see if he can read this defense while he is not just rolling out because he wants to, but because he has to, because we got people on the hunt. So it was one of those things where it kind of, it evened out a bit in the second half. And he was the first one to admit, I got to play better. I have to play better. And he has to, because in that situation, you can't be the guy who turns it over. You got to be able to play clean. You already had a fumble that was, scooped and scored. You can't throw interceptions and give the ball back to an offense that is red hot. You can't do that. And I don't care who you are, but especially in your rookie game when you need everybody else to help you, and you better be able to help yourself. And so it got a little shaky in the second half. But yeah, I think overall, I thought it was a pretty good look. I thought he really showed some stuff. He's obviously got a great arm, but a lot of that gets skewed because when Chris Olave goes out, who knows what the game plan was and how it involved Chris Olave, and now you don't have him, and suddenly your receiving core is Rashid Shaheed, Bub Means, Cedric Wilson, now things change.
Yeah.
The whole dynamics of Mason Tipton, I won't leave him out. Things have changed now. And so now it's like, okay, the guy that we thought was going to be able to run this route isn't here. Who else can we run it with? And do they respect this guy the same way they respected that guy? Because they're going to give that guy some room. Now the windows shrink a little bit. And so it's one of those situations where, man, injuries are tough in the NFL, obviously. But I thought Spencer Rattler handled himself well, considering everything he saw in that game. And hopefully he'll grow from it because he's going to see these things again. If I'm an opponent, again, I'm watching film, and I'm saying, okay, Tampa Bay came at him with this blitz. It got him a little bit off schedule. The throw wasn't accurate or whatever. Okay, we're going to show him that blitz. So hopefully he has learned from it because a lot of these things he will see again.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely going to be able to ID some different things based off of what he saw Sunday in Copycat League, as they like to say. The Broncos will probably throw some of the same things at him. How'd you feel about Bub Means? I mean, he had to get more involved because obviously Chris Olave goes down early, but I think he held his own as well. He
answered the call. His touchdown catch, I mean, he beat that corner immediately. Beat him immediately, and he wasn't the primary, which is why the throw took a little bit longer, because he beat the guy immediately. He was open for the touchdown probably 2-3 yards off the line of scrimmage. He had beaten that guy. And so, to Rattler's credit, he got to that read and he got it to him before he runs out of real estate and gets out of the end zone. But I thought Bub handled it well, and you have to remember too, a lot of the reps that Spencer Rattler has gotten in practice have been with Bub Means. So that's probably a little built-in chemistry there, and hopefully he's got a guy that he feels comfortable with and he can rely on, because Thursday night Bub Means is going to be in the lineup because Chris Olave ain't. Chris Olave is in concussion protocol, and I doubt very seriously that he's going to be out of protocol before Thursday's game. I ain't no doctor, and we don't have the injury report yet, but that would be my guess. So Bub Means is going to have to play some, and hopefully he'll be out there ready for the task. He looked like he was ready for it yesterday on Sunday, and so hopefully he can build off of that.
Well, in talking to him, he does not lack confidence or energy. He is definitely ready to go.
And I got to find out again, because we asked him in the locker room, hey, where's the game? Where's the touchdown ball? And he's like, I don't know. I think Spencer might have, because it was Spencer Rattler's first touchdown pass. So one of those two did not get a first touchdown ball, or they got a ball that wasn't the actual ball. So but when you get it, you don't care where it came from. You just want to frame it up at the house anyway. But one of them didn't get a game ball, so I got to find out who got the actual game ball.
I just love his demeanor, because Bub is always smiling. He's always, excited to talk to you, and he's always asking you how you're doing too. And I love that about him.
He does that. He does do that. He does do that. He's a bubbly guy. Willie Gay's a bubbly guy. There are some guys who are
new additions to the team.
They're upbeat personalities, and Willie, Willie told us that when he signed with the Saints, he was like, I'm the juice guy. I'm the guy who's got all the positive vibes, and he has not been less than his word. He's been exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, he's always out on the field getting the crowd going and throwing his arms up, and then he had the only sack in the game yesterday. I think it's pretty remarkable that he was able to play in that game after having surgery on his hand. It's only missed, was it 2 games?
Yeah, he missed the KC game, and did he miss?
No, I guess he went out in the other game and then missed 1 game.
Yeah, and had hand surgery.
Right.
Had hand surgery. So yeah, because I was a little bit surprised to see him out there, because he's a linebacker. You got to tackle. You got to be able to use your hands.
Right.
Sometimes you're making arm tackles, or sometimes you're making tackles with your hands, where you grab a guy by the jersey, and I think clearly he could not do that with one hand, but he played a pretty good game. Yeah,
no, it was big to have him available, because Pete Werner is still sidelined as well.
Yeah, and that's a situation you need that depth, and Pete Werner is a productive starter, and hopefully that hamstring gets better, because the Saints need him. But that's so Pete Werner's. How many starters up? Pete Werner.
Don't go down the list, JD.
I think I counted 5 starters out in the inactive list. And then, because I put Will Harris in there too, even though he's, on injured reserve now, but I put him in there too.
Yeah.
And then during the game, Chris Olave goes out and Tyrann Mathieu goes out.
And then for a moment, Jonathan Abram was out.
And Jonathan Abram, who's filling in for Tyrann Mathieu, goes out. And Jonathan Abram was not fluid in his movement after the game, so you wonder about him because
he said it was a back.
He said his back tightened up.
Yeah.
So hopefully that's something that can be worked out because he is needed in that secondary now. You don't have Will Harris. Tyrann had a forearm contusion, so it looks like he might be okay to play Thursday. But if he's not, you got Jordan Howden and you got JT Gray. And I think those would be the only 2 healthy guys because Jonathan Abram, Jonathan Abram did go back and finish the game, but now you got to check on his status on the short week too.
Yeah, I mean, you could look at the practice squad again, but Jonathan Abram got brought up from the practice squad.
Yeah, and that might be Ugo Amadi.
Right.
So it's just, the attrition has hit this team in ways that it just hadn't previous seasons. Every team has injuries. This looks like the San Francisco 49ers situation in preseason where they had so many guys
and they
out.
canceled the joint practice. We can't cancel stuff.
Yeah, they had to cancel the joint practice because they didn't have enough bodies. And it's like, man, the Saints are getting to the point where they have precious few bodies now at certain positions because how deep can you go on the offensive line?
Yeah,
you're already into the deep end of the pool on that one. How deep can you go in the secondary, which is one of the strengths of this team? But how deep can you go in the secondary now? I mean, it's getting to the point where you start scratching your head and say, what else can happen?
Well, luckily, it sounds like Tyrann Mathieu is going to be able to play on Thursday. DA said that he thinks he'll be all right. Looks like Kendre Miller will be back in action. We're going to keep following the rest of the players, but it is a short week, so that's tough. And luckily, after this game on Thursday, you have 10 days to rest before you play the Chargers in the next game. So there's going to be a little bit of a reprieve. I'm sure this team will get some time off after the Broncos game, much needed, but a win first would be very nice. And honestly, I think we don't like to say must win around here.
Yeah.
But
I never say must until it's a game that will eliminate you from the playoffs. That's when I say it's must.
Right.
But Juwan Johnson says we need to win. And I'm leaning with Juwan on this one.
As Graf says endorsed, like he will endorse that.
That Juwan Johnson said this team needs a win. And look, when you lose 4 straight, you need to get that winning taste back in your mouth, especially when you're going to have 10 days to sit on this one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long time to sit on, but now sitting on a win for 10 days is, at least you got something to build on because you're still 3-4 if you win the game. But still, you got something good, a good feeling to go in with. So I'm with Juwan on this one. This team, I feel like, needs a win, needs to get that good feel back.
Yeah. We're going to get into a lot more of the Saints as they get back on the practice field tomorrow. So real quick turnaround for them. We'll have another podcast Wednesday breaking down the Saints side of things. And then Thursday will be our big preview for the Broncos game because there is a lot going on in that game. Drew Brees is going to be here. Sean Payton, former Saints coach, is going to be obviously on the other side of things, as well as probably 20 former Saints players.
Yeah, you're doing something for Brees, so the former players are going to come in and celebrate with him, obviously.
No, I'm talking about the ones that are on the Broncos now.
Well, that too. So, and look, there are, how do I say this? Probably some salty feelings around Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Although he was wonderful for the franchise, all-time winningest coach in franchise history, won the Super Bowl.
It's kind of like, what have you done for me lately, or where did you leave me most recently?
Well, yeah, I mean, and then it's, hey, you're with the enemy tonight.
Yeah. And
we need a win bad. So, I think it was, I don't know if it was Cam who said, hey, it doesn't matter if it's, this coach or that coach, we need to win. So whoever's over there, we just need to beat that team. And so he coincides with that. But I'm sure the flip side is he should get a warm greeting as deserved. Sean Payton was very, very good for this franchise in terms of teaching it how to consistently win and consistently be a contender. Even though they won the one Super Bowl, but they had some fantastic teams and some fantastic times, and so he deserves the cheers that will probably accompany him being announced. But after that, okay, you cheer for him, and then you go out and see if you can kick his tail. Yeah, him and his team, and all those former Saints that are on that team. You want to kick their tails too. So, hopefully the Saints can shake his hand and make him feel hey, good to see you, and then go out and kick his what.
Yeah. Do you know how Coach Payton feels about terrible towels, rally towels?
I think he does not like them.
Is that why we're going to have them on Thursday?
Well, and you're celebrating Drew.
Is that why we're giving them out?
You're celebrating Drew, too.
Are we that petty?
Well, of course. I mean, is there an organization more petty than this one? Petty in a good way, folks. Petty in a good way. But, I mean, nobody matches petty like we do. But, and then it's a little, Drew reminder, souvenir. So hopefully he doesn't like them.
That's what we're going with.
Yeah,
it's a Drew souvenir.
Now, if the crowd really wants to get on his nerves, wear bucket hats. See, that's what they should have announced. Wear bucket hats. He is not a fan of bucket hats. So that's what we should have been giving away commemorative bucket hats to 70,000 people, and that probably would have aggravated them a whole lot more than the towels.
That's hilarious. Well, I'm glad we can laugh on this Monday, even though we were definitely going through it yesterday. As Cam Jordan said, and I'm sorry if you guys don't like this word, but he said they will still be pissed on Thursday. So this team has not taken this loss lightly or the situation that they have been in. And I know they're going to bring everything they got on Thursday. So we'll be here all week to break it down before we get to that game. JD, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the New Orleans Saints podcast. Join us 3 times per week on NewOrleansSaints.com, the Saints mobile app, or you can download the podcast on iTunes. We'll see you next time, right here on the New Orleans Saints podcast.